So literally, by telling yourself a story, by depicting yourself as a tragic hero who will eventually succeed and slay those papers of your treacherous boss, or whatever you want to call it, this actually makes you more gritty. It reduces pain, literally, because of the release of endorphins. Turning your life into a game. Well, yes, it sounds like a child's fantasy, but what if I told you that the gamification of your life is an actual research field in neuroscience with many mind-blowing studies behind it? And what if I told you that I actually gamify my own life? I subconsciously did this as a child in school, in fact, and now that I know that research backs this up, I consciously gamify my life to increase my performance, to increase my drive, and to get myself into this extremely productive, creative, and immersed brain state that we call flow, or the zone. And yes, I am serious. In my mind, I'm not a dementia researcher, but I'm a freaking paper slayer who saves the world. For the benefits, of course. Now, in all seriousness, today's video is all about how you can gamify your life. I will first explain the amazing benefits of gamifying your life, so the neuroscience behind it, and then I dive into the results of some amazing studies. Now, for example, a study showed that gamifying your life helped cancer patients to become more mentally tough and to believe more in themselves, in believing in overcoming cancer. And this is because gamifying your life releases certain neurochemicals in your brain that increase your resilience, your drive, and even reduce pain. And there are many more cool effects, as you will see in a moment. And finally, I will give you a step-by-step guide of how you can turn your life into a game for more fun, performance, grit, and the deeply focused flow state. Now, as usual, before we get started, please take a moment to smash those like and subscribe buttons so that we can build an army of high performers and neuroscience enthusiasts together. I would highly appreciate it. That said, my name is Nicholas. I'm a neuroscientist, dementia researcher, as well as a high performance and flow coach, and this is how to gamify your life for high performance. So to begin with, let's talk about the power of a play mindset, because there are actually very famous people out there that have held this play mindset up until adulthood, actually across their entire life, and who made incredible discoveries, innovations, and breakthroughs doing so. And one of these people was the physicist Richard P. Feynman. Now, in case you don't know him, Feynman is actually a very famous physicist who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1965, and his biggest contribution was probably that he assisted the development of the atom bomb in World War II. So he literally was a pioneer in his field. And he was also very famous for doing stupid shit. And I'm serious about this. He actually even wrote a book about it. And this book is called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. And there he pretty much talks about his misadventures, as you could call it. And this is actually a quote from his book. To read it, physics disgusts me a little bit now, but I used to enjoy doing physics. And why did I enjoy it? I used to play with it. I used to do whatever I felt like doing. It didn't have to do with whether it was important for the development of nuclear physics, but whether it was interesting and amusing for me to play with. And he really did things such as that. For example, in one of the images here, he plays bongos. Apparently, he played those bongos naked, which, of course, is not recommended for professional purposes, of course. But such as that, it tells you the fact that he was a very playful spirit, playful in mind, very curious, testing various different things. And there's actually a biological background for this, because play is actually an evolutionary conserved mechanism in our brain. Play expands the amount of possibilities that we have. Now, more precisely, what play does is that it increases plasticity in the prefrontal cortex, so it opens up your prefrontal cortex for learning. And by playing, you explore possibilities. And if you explore more possibilities, then your brain has more options to choose from. You become more creative, you become more innovative. And I'm not defending here that Richard P. Feynman did shit, but what I pretty much defend here is the fact that you should play, continue to play, And actually, Andrew Hoopman talked about this in his latest podcast about the power of play. He even recommends you should do 1 hour of playing, random playing every week, for example, chess, because again, it increases the amount of options, it increases your creativity. Now, that said, let's look into gamification itself, as promised in the video, of course. And there are a few specific things that have been proven in studies. And when I talk about gamification, then I talk about coming up with a gaming narrative for your life. So I shall slay those papers. That is not a joke. That is actually reality. So what you would do by gamifying your life is come up with a story of why what you do is amazing. Literally. So you depict yourself as the hero who does this and that, who went through these tragic events, who slays the papers that were given to you by your treacherous boss, so that you can protect your employees from harm and that you can make a bigger impact in the world. Whatever it is, you can come up with an amazing story. And what this does, again, is change your brain and you change neurochemicals in your brain. The first thing is that by gamification, you, of course, establish this narrative, this story in your brain. And this story ideally is also emotionally engaging for you. Seeing yourself as the tragic hero, for example. And what this does is that it actually increases your intrinsic motivation. Now, intrinsic motivation is the motivation that comes from you, from the inside. External motivation would mean that you work for a reward, for example, for a job promotion, etc. But having inner motivation, that is actually a leading cause for success. Those people that are most famous, the most successful in the world, like Elon Musk, they have intrinsic motivation. Elon Musk wants to advance humanity, for example, by colonizing Mars. So ideally, if you want to be your very best, if you want to be a high performer, then you need to find the source of inner motivation. For me personally, it will, for example, be to bring a drug for Alzheimer's into the clinic. Or, of course, to help you guys to become the best that you can be. That's the reason why I am a coach. In any case, this intrinsic motivation, that's a combination of curiosity, so looking into what your career is about, passion, that means loving what you do, and purpose, meaning that you do what you love to make a bigger positive impact in the world. You can mimic that. You can mimic that by coming up with a gaming narrative, by depicting yourself as the hero of your life. And what this also does is actually increase your grit, your mental toughness. More precisely, it's called perseverance grit. So I made an entirely separate video about how you can become mentally tough and more gritty. I will link it for you in the comments. But simply put, how much you can push, how high your perseverance grit is depending on your willpower. Willpower is dependent on how much energy you have, of course. So the later it is in the day, the longer you work, the more fatigued you are, the less willpower you have. Then it's dependent on your mindset. How do you look at it? Do you want to push yourself to the limit? Do you enjoy the challenge? Or do you hate challenges? Do you hate hardship? That depends on how much grit you have, obviously. And there's, of course, importantly, your passion. If you love what you do, then you don't need motivation. It's much easier for you to keep going. And again, by gamifying your life, by putting up this story, basically, that's a way in which you can also increase your grit. It's easier for you to persist. It's easier for you to slay those freaking papers and to destroy this mountain of paperwork because you come up with an emotionally engaging and fun story around it. And you come up with a way or a reason why it's fun for you, why it's important for you. The second benefit of gamification is that you have better memory recall, literally better memory formation. And there are several reasons. The first one is the fact that if you engage your emotions, you are more attentive. That means that if something stresses you out, you obviously pay more attention to it. If something is really fun, really enjoyable for you, you also pay more attention to it. So that's a way in which you can use your emotions again to be more engaged in what you do. And by coming up with this engaging narrative, this story about your life, why it's so cool, why you're a tragic hero who will crush the paperwork, the madness, that is a way in which you can increase your attention and engagement. Other reasons why is, of course, directly storytelling in itself is a way in which we memorize information in the brain. More about it in a second. And also it because if you tell stories, it actually releases a molecule called oxytocin in the brain. Oxytocin, also more about it in a moment, but what it does is increase empathy. It's easier for you to put yourself in the shoes of someone else by listening to a story. It makes the story more valid for you, makes it more real for you. Then third, what we have is, that's the main thing of gamification, that it changes the way you feel. It changes your state. So it improves your mood, it improves your drive and motivation, it improves your grades, your mental toughness, and it can even reduce pain, literally. Reasons why that is because it releases neurochemicals in your brain like dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. More about it also in a moment. And there are also two things that are highlighted in red here. So for those, I would recommend you to check out my previous videos. I will not go into detail in this video, but what gamification also does is that it provides immediate feedback. Immediate feedback is a way in which you get into this super focused flow state. Now, the question is, what is immediate feedback? A good example would be Pokemon. Think about it. Yes, I mean Pokemon. I mean Game Boy. Pokemon. For example, in Pokemon, if you attack a fire type with a water move, you get a message, super effective. That is immediate feedback because it tells you, hey, what you're doing is good. And whenever you get immediate feedback like that, a little bit of dopamine is released in your brain. You get this little dopamine kick, this, yeah, it works, basically like that. And dopamine is the reward neurochemical. It causes pleasure, but it also motivates you. So it motivates you to do more of it, to do more water moves, basically, to attack the fire Pokemon with these water moves. And if you manage to implement that in real life, then of course you get more pleasure, you get more motivation, and you get more flow. It also accelerates learning, dopamine, by the way. So for more information, I would highly recommend you to check out my video about the flow triggers, so that you know how do you get into the super immersed and deeply focused and motivated state that we call flow. And finally, what gamification also does is reduce your cognitive load. So cognitive load is the amount of brain dump you have, the amount of waste in your brain, you could say, those messy thoughts and emotions that block up your brain. And this is a problem because we have a certain amount of brain capacity, let's say 100% to focus. And if you have all of these distracting thoughts and emotions in your brain, like, oh my God, what should I do? I have a deadline tomorrow and I haven't done anything. Oh my God. Or if you think about it, what should I eat for dinner? I don't know. It's just so difficult to decide between these things, these two things. All of that takes away from your working memory and it's harder for you to focus. And with gamification, you come up with a story, with a narrative. It helps you to lessen this cognitive load. Also helps you to lessen stress, anxiety, overwhelm, and all of these things that again that can occupy your brain and hinder focus. So once more, check out the video about cognitive load that I made last week, and you will see, you will find a way to pay attention and focus better. Now let's look into the cool science behind it. So first and foremost, here's an interesting fact to know, and it's the fact that again, emotions help you to pay more attention to what is important to you. Now here's actually a study from 2014. It's a bit complicated, so I might as well go with what Michiko Sakaki, she was the one who conducted the study, summarized in an interview. And what she said is that she found that participants' attention is affected by emotion and priority, meaning that they pay more attention to details or information that are relevant to them. So what this means is, in other words, if you're very emotional about something, then you pay more attention to it. As simple as it is. And it makes sense. Let's say you have a deadline tomorrow. Let's say you have to submit a big project at work. And obviously that might create a lot of overwhelm, a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure. It might also cause some never before seen motivation and drive, and you feel like pushing it, like going to the limit. So these emotions make this deadline tomorrow very important for you. And as a consequence of that, because you now prioritize this deadline tomorrow, you pay more attention to this deadline. You pay more attention to things that are related to this deadline. And it is a way in which you can increase your engagement. So in the sense of gamification, it means that you make your boring life interesting. So One of the things I have to do, for example, in the lab is pipette into 96 well plates. So pipette, 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 hole after hole, do it for hours and hours and hours, which is boring as hell, just me. And the way in which you can make this more exciting is to just imagine, just use your imagination. Imagine how you, every time you pipette it, every time you pipette into one of these well plates, how you get closer to your goals, how you change the world, how you become a famous researcher who is working behind closed doors to come up with the wondrous solution or drug for Alzheimer's disease to treat memory loss forever. Whatever it is, or imagine whatever it is, just gamify your life in a way that it becomes more emotionally engaging for you. It becomes more interesting. And that, of course, helps you to stick with it, to be more motivated in the long term. Then the second thing is memory. As I mentioned earlier, we actually memorize things in form of stories. I was actually studying in 2021. It might also be a bit complicated, but to summarize it briefly, what I did is that I asked participants to remember events that are connected by a story. So there were like 5 events, and those were connected by a coherent story. So I told a story that included all of these events. Or alternatively, they asked the participants to remember events that occurred at the same time, but they were not related whatsoever. Maybe one thing was about a marriage. Maybe the other thing was about buying cars, whatever. So these things had nothing to do with each other. And then I tested the participants the next day. And what I found is that the participants remembered things better when they were told as a story. There's actually also a hack that is done by Jim Quick, the memory coach. What he tells people is to go through, imagine themselves walking through their apartment, for example, looking at different objects in the apartment, then assigning something to the object like go shopping tomorrow. This piece of information sits on the chair. Or don't forget to bring out the waste tomorrow. This piece of information lies in the corner. Then a step on something. It's absolutely disgusting and reminds you to clean up the house. Something like that, for example. So that you engage a little bit of emotions, disgust. And again, what that does is help you memorize it better because A, you engage emotions, and B, you remember everything in form of a story, how you walk through your apartment, how you look at different objects one after another, how different emotions are triggered that disgust you and that remind you of a certain activity that you need to do, etc. So once again, this is a way in which you can make your life literally a story that is memorable for you, that is more memorable for you. Next thing would be about positive emotions. It's actually a pretty cool study, so this is a big one in my opinion. That was in 2021, so quite young in fact. And in this case, they had 81 children, and these children were hospitalized and put in intensive care units. So those children went through some trauma, literally. And then they either told those children stories. So these stories were lighthearted or amusing, such as child stories. Or alternatively, they let them do riddles. Just had to solve crossword puzzles. They were also funny, by the way. But the main difference between both was the fact that in the one case, the story was told. The other case, the kid had to solve a riddle. And what I found is that storytelling had insane effects. What storytelling did actually, so they told the children those funny stories about a positive outcome, how great it is, how it always turns out in a good way. And what happened is that they got an increase in this molecule called oxytocin in the brain. Extreme increase, in fact, twice as high as if they were to do the riddles. And what oxytocin does is actually a molecule that improves trust. It improves empathy. It makes you feel better and comfortable. Makes you more social and more inclined to talk to other people, actually. And it also improves the validity of things that you hear. So because you have higher empathy, you have an easier time to put yourself into the shoes of someone else. You trust them more, you believe them more, you have more empathy for them. So it makes stories more believable. And yeah, again, if you tell yourself a gamification narrative, how you're the tragic hero of your life, then you get this oxytocin release in your brain as well. And it will make you feel better. And it will make it feel more believable for you. It will make your life, your story more memorable to you. Literally, that's the effect of this neurochemical. Other cool effects were the fact that cortisol was reduced. Now, cortisol is actually a stress hormone. So literally, by telling yourself a story, you can reduce the stress, long-term stress actually, in fact, in your body. And how insanely cool is that? And then also what was insane was the fact that these children in intensive care units, just by telling them these fun-hearted and light stories with a positive outcome, they reported less pain. They felt less physical pain. And one of the reasons why that is because it wasn't assessed in this study, unfortunately, but these children, what happens when you listen to a story also is that you get endorphin release in your brain. Endorphins are painkillers. So literally, by telling yourself a story, by depicting yourself as a tragic hero who will eventually succeed and slay those papers of your treacherous boss, or whatever you want to call it, this actually makes you more gritty. It reduces pain, literally, because of the release of endorphins. It can even cause euphoria. Also, a thing to mention is that they were more positive in general. So these kids saw their time in hospital more positive. So once again, if you tell yourself this gamification story of how your life is, how you're the hero of your life, it literally makes your life better. It makes your life more positive. You experience it as more positive. And how cool is that? Now, another big thing is they can increase grit. And one of the best studies I've seen out there is actually about literally making cancer patients play a video game. Now, it was not any video game, but this video game was developed by guys at Stanford University in the Hope Lab, and it's called Remission. And in this video game, you control a nanobot called Roxy, and Roxy travels through the bodies of these cancer patients, or fictional cancer patients, and destroys cancer cells. So you battle bacterial infections. It's pretty much a shooter. You shoot it all down. But in addition to that, what this game also does is inform those that play the game. Inform them with side effects of cancer, how to handle these side effects, how the cancer treatment has to occur to make improvements, etc. I tested this video game in 375 male and female patients between 13 and 29 years old who had a diagnosis of cancer, which is of course not a joke. If you're diagnosed with cancer, that is a serious issue, especially at that young age. Yeah, and they literally let them play this video game. So they got the normal cancer treatment, chemotherapy, which has many side effects. You feel horrible, you lose your hair, your immune system is weakened, etc. But then again, they let them play this video game. What I found is that those people that played the video game had better adherence. So they actually took the treatment for a longer time, voluntarily. They also increased their self-efficacy, meaning that they believed in their ability to beat cancer. One of the reasons why is because the video game, again, primed them to do so, to think so. So they literally turned their life into this game in which they are the hero, Roxy, who kills these cancer cells in the body. So literally, that's how they started imagining it. And also the knowledge increase, of course, because they were actually educated by this game as well. What I found very interesting is that this game, apparently it did not affect the self-reported measures of adherence. So those cancer patients did not think that anything changed. They didn't think that they adhered to their treatment better, etc. However, the data shows that they actually did. So they adhered to their treatment better. So even though they didn't even think they did, they did. They were more gritty, which is probably amazing. However, in this study, it had no effects on stress, the feeling of control, or quality of life. Although this is just a single randomized study, and what you also have to mention is that this is, of course, not consciously done. So these patients did not consciously gamify their life, but rather they played a game that put them into this gaming mindset. So once again, the effects will probably be stronger if you do this consciously, if you gamify your life consciously. Another pretty cool story was actually in 2012. In this case, 57 undergraduate students were analyzed with functional magnetic resonance imaging. So they basically just looked at the blood flow in the brain. Lots of blood flow means high brain activity. Little blood flow means low brain activity. So that's how you can judge it. And then they checked what happens if these undergraduate patients played this game, this cancer game I just talked about. And what I found is that when they started playing the game, oh yeah, and I have to mention that they compared playing the game to just watching it, watching someone else playing the game. And what I found is that those people that actually did the game themselves, when the game started, they had more activation in the reward center of the brain. We call this the mesolimbic reward pathway. So that's the pathway where this molecule dopamine is created. And the result of that is more motivation, more pleasure, literally. Also, what happened is that while they were playing, they decreased activation of the front part of the brain. We call this prefrontal cortex. Now, if you look at the brain image, I pointed actually out there. There's this blue region in the front of the brain here, basically, here in the front. That means that there's no activity there. That's where the prefrontal cortex is. And in this brain area, we actually assess risks. We process fear. So that's where we worry. That's where we doubt ourselves, basically, in this brain area. This brain area, we also do other things. We go against our emotional responses. For example, if you don't want to go out jogging, you feel sluggish, you're bored, you don't want to do it, then your logic part of the brain, which is the front part of your brain, here the prefrontal cortex, is the part of your brain that says, hey, it doesn't matter if I'm tired, hey, it doesn't matter if I'm bored and sluggish, I have to do this. I need to get out, I need to get fit, I need to lose weight. So that's basically this brain area. We also make decisions in this brain area and any type of logical thinking and long-term planning. So if you plan for your goals, so what do you want to accomplish next week, which you should ideally do, that's also in this front part of the brain. And when the people actually played this game, this front part, the prefrontal cortex, was switched off. Sounds paradox, but what this means is that the worry, the self-doubt, and all of these things, the thoughts in general, they all disappear. And that's actually what happens in flow. Now, of course, I will not talk about flow in particular here, but in flow, everything just flows. As the name says, everything feels super flowy. Things just work out for you. You feel amazing. Your productivity and creativity explode, go through the roof. You forget yourself and everything else, including your anxiety, your stress, your overwhelm, etc. And that's also one of the reasons why flow is probably deep peak state. It's a state in which we are the most fulfilled, the most productive, and in which we feel our best. It's addictive, literally. Now, again, if you want to learn more about flow, I'll link you a video about flow in the comments. So check it out if you're interested in becoming your very best and reaching new levels of productivity. But to summarize this, what this means is that if you have this gaming mindset, so if you see your life as a game, you get more of the neurochemical dopamine, of the reward neurochemical dopamine. You're more motivated. You feel more pleasure about what you do. And what you also find is that the anxiety goes away, the overwhelm goes away, and you're more likely to get into this super immersed state, super productive and creative state we call flow. All right, now to summarize it, just briefly, generally a play mindset, it leads to innovation, creativity, and more breakthroughs. That's because it opens up plasticity in this brain area called prefrontal cortex, the logic center of the brain. So it means that your brain has more options to choose from, and if you have more options to choose from, you are more creative, like Feynman. Other than that, games are rich in flow triggers. One of them is, for example, immediate feedback, like the super effective message in Pokemon. Or let's say you earn money in a game. If you earn money in a game, you get this ping sound, basically. And you get this little shoot of dopamine in your brain. You're like, damn, this made me money. I need to do more of it. And it motivates you to do more of it. And if you introduce all of that into your real life, you get this in real life. You might accomplish something. You run a mile. You get this immediate feedback. You tell yourself, awesome, I got a mile done. Let's run another one. So you get this dopamine kick. It keeps you going. Gets you in a super immersed state, etc. Besides that, what I covered in the studies that I just showed you is that gamification improves your life because it creates this emotionally engaging story in your life. And this emotionally engaging story, like seeing yourself as the hero of your life, how to do it in a moment, by the way, the steps. So if you see yourself as the hero, you come up with this gaming narrative, it improves attention. So you pay more attention literally to what is important to you, to your big goals, you're more engaged in it. It improves memory because you create this story throughout your life, and the story then connects everything that happens in your life, so you remember things better. Then storytelling in itself, if you tell yourself that you're the hero of your life, it boosts positive emotions. You get oxytocin release. So oxytocin makes this story that you tell yourself feel more real, more believable to you, improves empathy and trust. Then you get endorphin release, which are painkillers. So it allows you to push harder, to go further, to go beyond your limits, basically. You have reduced stress hormone levels, reduced cortisol levels. Then besides that, if you see your life as a game, then participating in a game, so participating in a game of life, you could say, helps you in many ways because it activates this reward pathway in your brain, the mesolimbic dopamine system, for more motivation, for more drive, for more pleasure, etc. And on the other hand, you have less activation of this prefrontal cortex, this brain area in the front of your brain. So what this does is that you think less. Literally, and because you think less, there's less anxiety, there's less worries, there's less fear, and things feel more flowy. Literally, you get into this flow state in which everything just seems to work. And finally, of course, more greater mental toughness. If you see your life as a game, you're more gritty. And the reason why is because of all of these neurochemicals like endorphins that kill your pain. You feel less pain. And because of the flow state, which of course reduces anxiety risk. And all of these other feelings like overwhelm, etc., they would otherwise block you. So the question is, how do you gamify your life? Just real quick, that is what you can do for yourself. Now, first of all, must ask yourself, what is the behavior or the outcome that gives me the maximum results? So let's just give some goal clarity. So what do you want to accomplish? Maybe you want to stick to a workout routine. Maybe you want to finish a presentation for something, for an important, simply for an important meeting. It could be anything, whatever it is. Maybe you want to accomplish a job. You want to get a job promotion. It could be anything, whatever it is, just make clear what it is. Then next, you need to assign a reward. That is the immediate feedback flow trigger I talked about. So you can give yourself points. Let's say you do your jogging session of 30 minutes a day. You can give yourself a point. You can give yourself level ups. Maybe every time you do a run, 30 minutes, you can increase your level. Maybe the next time you try to hit level 31 and you run 31 minutes, etc. So you can literally think of it this way, like a game. You can even give yourself real rewards, like eating out. Let's say you accomplish a presentation in half the time you would normally do. You only need 1 week to finish this presentation instead of 2 weeks. You can set yourself a real life reward. Go to a restaurant. Maybe you buy yourself a little gadget, a new phone. Or for me, I love cooking, so I would get myself a new pan or something. So in a sense, give yourself a reward. It can be a fictional reward or it can be a real life reward. Third, you want to identify an enemy. The point here really is that it gives you more goal clarity and creates this story, this narrative. Enemy could be your boss, your horrible boss that pushes you to your limits, that everyone hates, the villain of your life. Other than that, you can also define other things as enemy, like overworking. Maybe you work too less and that is your enemy. You want to avoid that. Maybe it's laziness. Maybe you want to stop being so sluggish all the time. Or maybe weakness in the gym. I tell myself that every single day when I go to the gym, I despise the fact of being weak and skinny. So I tell myself that this is my mortal enemy, the weakness, and I have to beat it. I have to get stronger so that I can beat this weakness in the ground, basically. So whatever it is, identify an enemy that you can slay. Doesn't need to make any sense because it's your fantasy story, basically. Then 4, define what an epic win would actually look like. That's to make your goal clearer. Also because you develop this emotional bond. So what does it look like when I win? How will I feel? And also has to do with goal visualization, because it's proven in studies that visualizing your goal in detail mobilizes you. So it gets you going, it motivates you, it makes you do the first step. A simple thing would be, as a scientist, I always think about the fact that if I publish those amazing publications, I might become famous one day. Might be known as the dementia researcher, whatever it is. Then of course you can tell yourself to make a certain amount of money. Or in the gym, I love this, that's just to bench, to deadlift, to squat high amounts of weight, like 120 kilo bench, whatever it is, That's not impressive, by the way, but still. And then you can imagine yourself how strong and muscular you are at that point when you lift these freaking weights. So what would an epic win look like for you? And finally, 5, gamify. And you can gamify it by coming up with a story around it all. So that's when you become creative and you create your own personal story, your hero story. I put a fun example here. So you could be the hero at work who slays the paperwork by your treacherous boss. No mercy allowed. And one sunny day, you will slay all of his minions, you will slay all of this treacherous work, and you shall take his place, you will rightfully become the leader, and you will lead your companions, your colleague, into a better and more sunny future. And that concludes the video. So thank you for your time and attention. Now, gamification is a concept that you don't need to tell anyone about. I obviously also don't tell others about my wild fantasies. That might be inappropriate. However, there is nothing wrong with using your imagination to make yourself the hero of your life and to benefit from it with more enjoyment, resilience, drive, and of course, flow. So I encourage you, gamify your life. Also, if you're very ambitious and you want to reach the next level of physical and mental performance, to accomplish your goals, or even to go beyond what you thought is possible, just shoot me an email at niklas.reich@gmail.com for neuroscience-backed high performance and flow coaching. More information in the video description. That said, have a playful week, high performers, and I will see you in the next video.